Did you know whole villages used to plan a full year around one question? Which power would let them live through the next winter, the next raid, the next sickness wave, the next bad harvest? Today, I'm revealing the 10 most powerful Slavic gods, ranked by the real force they hold inside the stories people kept repeating when survival was not guaranteed. From storms and war to fate, death, the household line, and the border between the village and the wild. Starting at number 10, Domovoi, the house guardian, the one nobody brags about until the night your fire goes out and your stored food starts disappearing. Imagine you are sealed inside for a week during deep winter. The roof creaks, the stove spits smoke, and every sound inside the walls feels personal. In the later folk record across East Slavic lands, Domovoi shows up in the everyday world, not on a battlefield or in a storm cloud. He is not a distant sky power. He lives where people sleep, cook, argue, make babies, and hide their grain. His domain is the house itself, the threshold, the stove corner, the barn, the shed, the tight space that decides whether a family lasts. This pick belongs on the list because Domovoi holds power that stays close and constant. He does not need thunder to ruin you. He can turn routine into failure. Stories give him 3 concrete traits. He warns through knocks and footsteps, he punishes neglect through small disasters, and he guards property through fear that keeps people disciplined even when nobody is watching. In a world where hunger makes people steal from their own neighbors, that kind of pressure becomes real authority. Proof for Domovoi sits mostly in ethnographic collections and repeated village testimony recorded centuries after Christianization, which means details shift by region. Still, records describe a pattern. Offerings of bread, salt, porridge, or the first bite of a meal placed near the stove or in the barn, spoken words asking the house spirit to accept a new family, and taboos around insulting him. That repetition matters, even when origin dates stay disputed. Picture a family moving into a new home after a bad season. The father carries a hot coal from the old stove to the new stove, careful not to drop it. The mother slips a small piece of bread into a hidden corner. Nobody laughs, nobody tests it. That night, the dog refuses to enter one room and the child wakes up crying, pointing into darkness. The adults do not call it imagination. They whisper and fix what they forgot to fix. What makes this terrifying is how Domovoi makes survival personal. He wasn't just a spirit, he was disciplined living in your walls. People could fight raiders, people could pray for rain, but a home that turns against you breaks you slowly. Moving to number 9, we leave the house and step straight into the fields. Moving to number 9, Yarilo, the spring force, the heat in the ground, the god tied to planting, fertility, and the dangerous optimism that comes after starvation months. Imagine the snow pulls back. The seed grain sits in a sack and you have one shot to gamble your future into the dirt. Yarilo shows up strongest in later ritual songs and seasonal customs across parts of Eastern Europe, with roots that sources suggest reach back into pre-Christian seasonal worship. He is not an abstract symbol. He is the job of spring itself, waking fields, waking bodies, waking livestock, waking hope. His role sits inside the survival calendar, since one missed planting window means hunger that does not forgive. He belongs on this list because his power decides whether food exists. Stories give him a set of traits. He arrives fast and burns bright, he pushes fertility in crops and people, and he carries a sharp edge that punishes disrespect through failed growth, sickness in animals, or social chaos tied to uncontrolled desire. This is not soft power. This is the pressure point where every family either grows or shrinks. The anchor detail comes from documented seasonal rites recorded by collectors and priests who watched villages keep older patterns under a Christian surface. Some records describe a spring procession with a young man or figure representing Yarilo, moving through fields, receiving gifts, and symbolically opening the land. Scholars argue about the exact age of the name and whether older deities sit behind the label, so treat the label carefully, but the survival function stays consistent. Now lock onto one tight scene. A village steps into a field at dawn. Men carry plows, women carry bread, somebody lays a wreath on a stake, a child runs too far and gets dragged back with a slap because trampling seed rows is treated as a serious offense. A chant goes up. The air is cold, but hands shake from hunger more than weather. The community does the ritual anyway because missing it feels risky in the plain, practical sense. What makes this terrifying is the deal underneath it. Eurylo offers growth, but he demands respect for timing, sex, work, and boundaries. He wasn't just spring. He was the power that decides whether your children see summer with full bellies. Moving to number 8, the list turns from raw fertility into social survival. Moving to number 8, Lada, the name tied to love, marriage order, and the fragile peace that keeps a village from tearing itself apart. Imagine a year with raids on the road, hunger inside the fence, and 2 families negotiating a marriage that could either unite the settlement or trigger a blood feud. Lada is complicated because the evidence sits in disputed territory. Later sources and regional references mention a figure connected to love and harmony, and scholars debate whether the name reflects a true deity or a ritual refrain that hardened into a god figure over time. So here's the honest framing. Records suggest a cultic idea of a protective force around marriage and social cohesion, even when the exact name origin stays contested. The role is still clear, keeping human ties intact. This pick matters because community survival needs more than food and weapons. A village can lose everything through internal collapse. Lada's traits and tradition lean practical. She blesses unions, she cools revenge cycles, and she sets rules for fertility inside stable households, which turns children from a burden into continuity. That power expands from private life into political survival fast, since marriage ties control alliances, land, and trust. The anchor detail comes from mentions of Lada or related forms in recorded songs, rituals, and later written condemnations of older practices, depending on region. Those condemnations matter because a church writer usually only condemns what people keep doing. Dispute exists over interpretation, so keep one foot on the ground. Even if the name shifts, the function inside the culture stays visible. Here is the signature moment: a wedding day under threat. The groom's family carries food to the bride's home, trying to prove respect, trying to prove seriousness. A drunk cousin starts an argument. An older woman shuts him down hard, calling out the old rule that no fighting can stain the threshold during the rite. A small offering is tucked away. The couple steps over the doorway together. The community exhales because the bond is not romance, it is a survival contract. What makes this terrifying is how invisible the danger is. Lada's power is not lightning. It is the ability to keep people from murdering each other when conditions get tight. She wasn't just love. She was the force that turns a village into a unit. Moving to number 7, we leave the household politics and step into the air itself. Moving to number 7, Dazhbog, master of winds, the one who turns a calm day into disaster without warning. Imagine you are hauling hay, smoke rises from your hearth, and a sudden wind shift drives sparks into your thatch roof. Dazhbog shows up in East Slavic literary tradition with one famous anchor in the tale of Igor's campaign, where winds are called Dazhbog's grandsons. That matters because it pins the name inside a known medieval text, not only late folklore. His identity is simple in plain terms: wind power with intent. His role is the invisible force that moves storms, smoke, fire spreads, sailing, and the entire risk profile of outdoor life. He belongs on the list because wind is not a background detail. Wind controls survival math. Traits tied to Dazhbog include sudden change, wide reach, and the ability to ruin multiple livelihoods in 1 hour, flatten crops, drive locust swarms or dust, push winter cold deeper, scatter a village fire into a full burn. A sword kills one man at a time. Wind can break a whole region. The proof paragraph is clean here. The medieval poem reference anchors the name, and later folk material keeps the idea alive in practical taboos around whistling, shouting into wind, and treating certain gusts as messages. Exact myth details vary, which fits an oral world. The constant is fear of a power that cannot be negotiated with using force. Signature scene. The first warm week after winter. Everybody rushes tasks. Somebody burns weeds near a fence line. The wind turns, flames jump, smoke blinds. People try bucket lines, but embers spread into dry thatch. The village learns in minutes what wind god means in real life. Afterwards, somebody spits a curse, then stops mid-word and crosses himself, because the old fear still grabs the throat. What makes this terrifying is scale with zero mercy. Dazhbog wasn't just wind, he was the authority over every plan humans make outdoors. Moving to number 6, we go from wind to the sun, the power that decides whether the year even works. Moving to number 6, Dazhbog the Giver, the sun-linked power tied to prosperity, justice, and the idea that warmth itself can be a god's gift. Imagine a gray summer that never heats up, grain stays thin, and people start counting stored food in whispers. Dazhbog appears in medieval East Slavic sources, including the pantheon listed in the primary chronicle connected to Prince Vladimir, plus later literary echoes. His identity in plain terms is a divine source of light and wealth. His category is not only sun, it is fortune and rightful share, the thing that makes a harvest field deserved instead of random. In a village economy, that becomes authority. This pick belongs here because people treated sunlight and prosperity as one system. Traits tied to Dazhbog include steady order, life-giving warmth, and a moral edge that punishes greed or oath-breaking through misfortune. He wasn't just a glowing disk in the sky. He was the power that decides whether effort turns into food, that moves him beyond the nature-spirit territory into something closer to law. For proof, chroniclers record the name, and the tale of Igor's campaign includes a famous reference to the Rus people as grandsons of Dazhbog, which shows the concept reaching into identity in politics. Disputes exist on exact myth layers, and Christian writers filtered what got recorded, but the repeated mentions still anchor his footprint in text, not only rumor. Signature moment, a drought season breaks into a brief window of sun. The whole village floods the fields. Nobody talks much. You hear tools, breath, and the creak of carts. At midday, a small gift of bread is lifted toward the sky, then eaten. There is no spectacle. The act is simple. Acknowledge the power that controls the math of life. What makes this terrifying is how total the dependency is. Dazhbog wasn't just light. He was the authority behind whether a year rewards you or crushes you. Moving to number 5, we drop from the sky to the ground to fate, to the work that keeps bodies alive. Moving to number 5, Mokosh, earth and women's work, the one tied to spinning, childbirth, protection, and the deep fear that fate can snap without warning. Imagine you are a mother in late autumn. Cloth needs to be finished, the baby is due, and sickness spreads through the houses one by one. Mokosh appears clearly in the primary chronicle list of Vladimir's idols, which gives her one of the stronger textual anchors in East Slavic territory. Her identity in plain terms is a powerful female figure tied to earth, moisture, and the work that holds a household together. Her category is survival infrastructure, spinning thread, weaving cloth, birthing children, protecting women, managing the domestic cycle that keeps bodies warm and fed. She belongs on this list because her power sits at the core of endurance. Traits tied to Mokosh include control over fertility, protection during childbirth, and influence over fate through thread imagery and labor taboos. She wasn't just a women's god. She was the authority over whether families continue, whether clothes exist for winter, whether the next generation even arrives alive. That is absolute power in a hard world. The proof point here is strong, a named presence in the chronicler's list, plus later blending in folk Christianity where certain female saints absorb older functions. The blending itself is a clue. When a culture keeps a need, the name changes, the function stays. Scholars argue details of cult practice, but the persistence of her role across centuries shows deep roots. Signature scene. A night birth in a cramped house. The men wait outside or in another room. Women boil water, tear cloth strips, whisper rules about what cannot be done during labor. A thread is tied around a wrist. Somebody promises a vow for safe delivery. The baby cries. The room loosens for 1 second, then tension returns because another child might not survive next time. Nobody calls it medicine only. It is medicine, plus fear, plus ritual. What makes this terrifying is how close her power sits to life's start line. Mokosh wasn't just earth. She was fate working through hands, cloth, and blood. Moving to number 4, the list climbs toward gods that build order, weapons, and rule itself. Moving to number 4, Svarog, the sky forger figure tied to fire, craft, and the rules that turn a group into a functioning society. Imagine your plow breaks right before planting. Bandits hit the road, and the only smith in range has to choose what gets repaired first, tools for food or iron for defense. Svarog's evidence trail runs through a mix of medieval chronicle material and later interpretation, including a famous case where a Slavic translation of a Byzantine chronicle uses Svarog for a forged god figure. Scholars debate what that substitution means and how far back a distinct Svarog cult reaches. Still, the identity in the Slavic world stays stable. Divine fire, divine craft, divine law, made tangible through metalwork. His category is civilization power. He belongs on this list because iron changes everything. Traits tied to Svarog include mastery over fire, control over craft knowledge, and authority over the rules that bind a community through labor contracts and obligation. He wasn't just a smith god. He was the reason a village can defend itself, feed itself, and enforce fairness through tools that do not break. That expands fast into political control, since weapon access decides leadership. For proof, you have the translation tradition plus the broader Slavic pattern of treating the forge as a sacred place with strict rules. No insults in the smithy, no careless talk over hot iron, no stepping over tools, no spitting in the fire. Dispute exists about early cult structure, so do not pretend every detail is confirmed. What is confirmed is the central place of craft power in survival culture. Signature moment, raiders are rumored nearby. The village gathers in the smithy yard, the smith heats iron until it glows, hammers out a hinge pin for the gate, then turns and makes a spearhead from a worn tool nobody can spare. Everybody watches, nobody interrupts. The fire throws light, and the air smells of coal smoke and sweat. In that moment, Svarog is not a distant myth, he is the difference between prepared and dead. What makes this terrifying is the quiet truth. The person who controls the forge controls the future. Svarog wasn't just fire, he was power turned into hardware. Moving to number 3, we move from village survival into temple state authority, where a god decides war and prophecy in public. Moving to number 3, Svetovid, also recorded under the name Svantovit, the four-faced war and prophecy god tied to the Western Slavic world and the kind of cult that ran on politics, tribute, and fear. Imagine a coastal stronghold, ships on the horizon, and a ruler waiting for one question: will the god approve war this season? Svetovid stands out because the written record is unusually vivid, especially in accounts from medieval writers describing the temple at Arkona on the island of Rugen. Those writers were enemies of the cult, so bias exists, but details line up across descriptions: a major sanctuary, a powerful priesthood, and a god treated as a national protector. In plain terms, Svetovid is not a small village spirit, he is a state god. His category is war plus prophecy plus harvest control rolled into one public authority. He belongs on this list because his power reaches beyond weather and family into collective decisions that reshape maps. Traits tied to Svetovid include prophecy through ritual, military legitimacy through priest-controlled signs, and a harvest link through symbolic drinking horns and annual ceremonies. He wasn't just a war god. He was the system that tells a whole people when to fight, when to raid, when to hold back, and who gets treated as legitimate. That is huge influence even without a single thunderbolt. For proof, the anchor is the name site, Arkona, with a temple described in medieval texts, destroyed during a Danish campaign in the late 12th century. Records describe a sacred white horse used for divination, rows of spears, a giant idol, and a ritual horn checked yearly to measure the coming season's fortune. Details get argued in modern scholarship, but the broad picture is hard to ignore. This cult had resources, organization, and political weight. Here is the signature moment. A war council gathers, but the final voice is not the warrior chief. The priest leads the sacred horse out, slow and controlled. Spear shafts lie on the ground in a pattern, and the horse's steps get watched with rigid focus. One wrong step means no war. One favored step means war is blessed. Men who have killed before stand silent, waiting for an animal's movement to decide their next season. That is not superstition in that world. That is chain of command. What makes this terrifying is the merger of belief with government. Svetovid wasn't just prophecy. He was the authority that could launch raids, starve enemies, enrich allies, and keep a nation moving in one direction. Moving to number 2, we leave the temple and step into the underworld edge where wealth, cattle, magic, and death hold hands. Moving to number 2, Veles, the chthonic power tied to livestock, wealth, the underworld, and the kind of trickery that makes even strong warriors nervous. Imagine you wake up and half the cattle are sick, the river fog sits heavy, and people start whispering that a curse walked into the pasture overnight. Veles has a strong footprint in East Slavic tradition, including oath formulas where he appears beside Perun in treaties and agreements, which matters because oaths get written down when politics gets serious. In plain terms, Veles rules the ground layer: cattle, money, trade, poetry, sorcery, and the realm of the dead. His category is wealth plus underworld authority. He operates where human control breaks down. He belongs this high because he controls what keeps communities alive even when swords stay sheathed. Traits tied to Veles include power over livestock health, influence over prosperity through trade and hidden knowledge, and a predatory ability to punish oath breakers. He wasn't just a cattle god. He was the reason a ruler could fear losing legitimacy overnight when wealth collapses and disease hits. That is not local fear, that is systemic fear. For proof, the anchor is the treaty and chronicle tradition that pairs Perun and Veles in swearing, plus the widespread place name echoes and later Christian overlays where saint figures take over functions once linked to livestock protection. Dispute exists on some myth specifics, but the dual appearance in political language is a serious signal. When rulers swear by a power, that power holds weight in the social order. Signature moment: a leader demands loyalty after a crisis. Men step forward, hands raised, swearing the oath, knowing the punishment is not only human enforcement. The fear runs deeper. If a man lies, the story says Veles finds him through loss, cattle dying, money vanishing, sickness creeping in, then death that does not feel clean. The oath becomes a trap with spiritual teeth. Nobody wants to test it because the risk hits the whole household, not only one body. What makes this terrifying is the way Veles turns every hidden corner into a threat. He wasn't just the underworld, he was the power behind debt, disease, betrayal, and the collapse that comes quietly. Moving to number 1, we face the god who stands opposite him, the one tied to law, war, sky violence, and the punishment that arrives loud. Moving to number 1, Perun, thunder and war, the top authority in the sky, the one rulers put forward when a society wants order enforced through fear. Imagine a treaty signing between armed men, rain rolling in, and every person present understanding that a broken oath could invite a strike from above, not only a knife in the dark. Perun is one of the clearest names in medieval East Slavic sources. The primary chronicle places him at the center of Prince Vladimir's pagan pantheon in Kiev, and treaty formulas record oaths sworn by Perun in political contexts. That matters because it moves Perun from story told by grandparents into name used in governance. In plain terms, Perun is the war god and thunder god whose role blends violence with law. His category is sovereign enforcement. He earns number 1 because his power hits every survival layer at once. Traits tied to Perun include command over storms that destroy crops and homes, control over victory and defeat in armed conflict, and the role of punisher of oath breakers, which turns him into a divine court. He wasn't just a storm. He was the authority that keeps social rules from dissolving when people get desperate. That is how a god becomes absolute, when fear of him replaces the need for constant human policing. For proof, you have multiple anchors. Chroniclers record idols and cult prominence. Treaties and oaths record his name in the mouth of elites. Later tradition pushes his functions into Christian saint associations connected to thunder, which hints that people did not want to lose the protection, only the label. Disputes exist over some details of ritual practice because hostile writers rarely explain rituals fairly, but the footprint is undeniable. You do not swear by a weak god when your life depends on agreement holding. Here's the signature moment that defines Perun's ranking. A ruler calls his men to swear. Weapons are present, not hidden. The oath is spoken in public, loud enough for witnesses. Somebody points upward when thunder cracks, and the room goes quiet because the sound lands inside the body. A man who planned to cheat feels his stomach turn. The threat is not vague. The threat is immediate. Storm, strike, war, punishment. In the old conflict stories, Perun stands opposed to Veles, and that conflict is not philosophical. It is a survival map. Sky order versus underworld chaos, public law versus hidden theft, lightning versus rot. What makes this terrifying is the completeness of the control. Perun wasn't just war. He was the final argument when rules fail. He was the fear that sits above every roof and every agreement. In a world where winter, hunger, and raids are normal, the community wants one power that can end a dispute without negotiation, and Perun fills that role with thunder. That is why number 1 does not feel optional. That is why his shadow stays long after temples fall. These 10 are not cute folklore mascots. These are immortals built from the hardest realities of pre-modern life. Hunger, cold, sickness, violence, birth, work, and the thin line between safety and the wild. Now tell me in the comments, who was your favorite? And what domain scares you the most when you imagine living under these rules for real? If you want more lists told with the same fast, grounded documentary energy, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications.